Hundreds more emergency responders will be deployed in Spain after devastating flash floods killed over 150 people.
Germany closes 3 Iranian consulates in the country in response to Tehran's execution of Iranian German prisoner Jamshid Shamad.
Could the European enlargement project be thrown off course following the elections in Georgia and Moldova?
About 7 people have been killed in northern Israel in the deadliest Hezbollah rocket strikes since Israel's military invaded southern Lebanon.
The Spanish government is deploying hundreds more soldiers to distribute essential aid after devastating flash floods killed over 150 in the country's worst natural disaster in decades. Rescue workers are still searching for survivors after torrential rain and hailstorms on Tuesday devastated several regions of the country, the eastern province of Valencia being the hardest hit. Thousands were left without water and electricity, and hundreds stranded after their cars were wrecked or roads were blocked. More than 1,200 soldiers from Spain's emergency rescue units have joined regional and local emergency workers in the search for bodies and survivors, with Spanish authorities saying the death toll is likely to rise. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez pledged the government's full support to the areas affected as he visited Valencia. He urged people to remain at home, saying the situation remained unstable.
Dramatic flooding in Spain is a reminder that Europe is not immune to extreme weather events. According to a report by Imperial College London, 3 of the deadliest such events in the last 20 years have hit the continent. The document links climate change with the intensification of these events and the potential risk of more casualties.
While we can't say that extreme weather events are caused purely by climate change, we know that the severity of them is massively enhanced by climate change.
The heat waves of 2022 and 2023 claimed almost 90,000 victims in Europe, according to the report. However, researchers are also cautious about the figures, pointing out that it is more difficult to measure the mortality caused by a heat wave than in the case of floods, but that solutions do exist to prevent such disasters.
We should be able to prepare for these events. So if you've got heat waves, we should be able to have early heat warnings to tell people not to go out, to try and stay in cool places, to drink more water. When there's flooding coming, we know that we can issue flood warnings, and if people follow those flood warnings and they may have to evacuate the areas that are likely to be affected, it can take them out of harm's way and it can massively reduce the mortality from these events.
This report was published a few days before the opening of COP29, the International Climate Conference. The UN has also pointed out that on this current course, the increase in temperature is likely to exceed 3 degrees before the end of the century.
Germany has ordered the closure of all 3 Iranian consulates in the country. Authorities in Berlin said it was in response to the execution of Iranian German prisoner Jamshid Shamad, who was kidnapped in Dubai in 2020. His execution followed a trial last year that Germany and international rights groups dismissed as a sham.
Wir haben Teheran immer wieder unmissverständlich klargemacht, dass die Hinrichtung eines deutschen Staatsangehörigen schwerwiegende Folgen haben wird. Daher habe ich entschieden, die 3 iranischen Generalkonsulate in Frankfurt am Main, München und Hamburg zu schließen.
According to the Iranian judiciary, Shamad was put to death in Iran on Monday on terrorism charges. Iran accused him of planning a 2008 attack on a mosque that killed 14 people, including 5 women and a child. Tehran claims over 200 others were injured in the attack.
Following reports of North Korean troops deployed in Russia, Belarus's leader said no one had seen any Pyongyang soldiers on the front line with Ukraine, accusing the West of inflating the fact, which may lead to escalation. Belarus has been a staunch supporter of Russia since Alexander Lukashenko, dubbed Europe's last dictator, came into power decades ago. The country has allowed Moscow's troops to be stationed within their border, acting as a staging area for the Russian invasion of neighboring Ukraine.
Нам в Европе это надо, нам это не надо. Это ни России, ни Украине, ни нам, и вам тоже, евразийскому континенту, это не нужно. Но опасность велика. Поэтому сегодня, прежде чем выдвигать какие-то с одной другой стороны концепции и, как это называется у них, план победы или еще чего-то, все это возможно, даже глупости, но надо сесть за стол переговоров. Без предварительных условий.
Also speaking at the event, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced that Moscow planned to sign a strategic treaty with Iran in the near future.
Мы будем приветствовать их подключение. Серьезным фактором в укреплении российско-иранских отношений станет готовящийся договор о всеобъемлющем стратегическом партнерстве между Россией и Ираном. Договор, как я сказал, готовится к подписанию в ближайшее время. Там будет затверждено стремление сторон к более тесной кооперации в области обороны и к взаимодействию в интересах мира и безопасности на региональном и глобальном уровнях.
Moscow has not provided any evidence to back its claims of NATO or the West's intention to act aggressively towards Russia or its troops. One of the Kremlin's main alleged reasons for its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in early 2022. Despite criticism from other political parties, Austria's newly elected parliamentary president Walter Rosenkrantz, who belongs to the far-right Freedom Party, hosted Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban in Vienna as his first official guest. Other Austrian parties, including the Greens and Social Democrats, had pushed back against Orban's visit, saying the Hungarian leader attacks freedom of expression and democratic values. The right-wing Freedom Party finished first in recent Austrian elections. Experts say the party managed to tap into Austrian anxiety on housing and healthcare, often successfully blaming migration for a host of other issues. Both the Freedom Party and Orban's Fidesz party were founding members of the European far-right Patriots for Europe group, which is now the third largest in the EU Parliament. The party is opposed to providing Ukraine with military equipment, questioned the efficacy of Western sanctions against Russia, and challenges the project of European integration, as well as the power granted to EU institutions.
Could the European Union's enlargement policy be at a crossroad? On Wednesday, the European Commission presented its annual progress report on candidate countries. But the publication comes after two elections in Moldova and Georgia, which have upset the political momentum seen since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The former said yes to Europe, but by a narrow margin of 50.4%. The Georgians, on the other hand, have kept a party in power that has adopted laws inspired by Russia. This has raised questions about the attractiveness of the European project.
30 seconds, but like this, I can do more for the web. That's also.
The European Union definitely has a lot of credibility, particularly in Georgia, and this is what the people choose for their future. It's not about the credibility of the EU, it's about the current government that is really taking their choice away from the Georgian people. In Moldova, the situation is a little bit different because Moldovans are very poor currently, and they have been the victims of all the manipulation from Kremlin, including increased prices, inflation, and they're just really vulnerable to that.
With allegations of interference from Russia in two elections, questions are also being raised about the EU's ability to be a political alternative and a guarantor of security and stability. This analyst believes that in order to strengthen their credibility, the 27 member states must no longer delay enlargement.
I don't think any of these countries are looking towards Moscow. I mean, that train left the station a very long time ago. I mean, Moscow remains a huge threat to the entire region and to the EU. But the EU really needs to stick to the commitment that it made, not just for the sake of the candidates and its own security, but also for its credibility as a geopolitical actor.
Observers like Amanda Paul are calling on the EU to support reforms and the defence of democratic values among the candidates for accession in order to bind them more closely to the European project. If the European response is insufficient, they say Russia could strengthen its influence in these territories.
At least 7 people have been killed in northern Israel after a barrage of Hezbollah rocket attacks from Lebanon. Israel's main emergency medical organization confirmed the deaths of a 30-year-old man and 60-year-old woman in the northern city of Haifa, hours after officials in Metula said that 5 people were killed. According to Israeli officials, the deaths in Metula on Thursday included 4 foreign workers. The attacks marked the deadliest strikes to hit Israel since its military invaded southern Lebanon earlier this month. Meanwhile, the Israeli military warned people to evacuate from more areas of southern Lebanon as airstrikes across the country killed at least 8. According to Lebanese government estimates, some 1.2 million people have been displaced since the Israeli escalation.